A nun had hidden her pregnancy for 9 months, until the day of labor. BST. Jude's convent stood on a gentle rise overlooking the sleepy town of Harmony Creek, nestled in a quiet valley in rural Pennsylvania. Its stone walls, weathered by decades of harsh winters and humid summers, held within them the quiet rhythms of prayer, work, and devotion. Sister Maria, at 28, was one of the younger members of the small community, known for her gentle hands in the infirmary, her quiet presence in the chapel, and the surprising sweetness of the bread she baked, loaves often sent to the local food pantry or the children's home nearby. For the past 9 months, however, Sister Maria carried a weight far heavier than loaves of bread or trays of medicine. Beneath the concealing folds of her simple, dark habit, a secret life grew, a life conceived not in love, but in fear and violation. The memory was a raw, recurring nightmare. A cold evening late last autumn, distributing soup and blankets from the convent's outreach van in a poorly lit alley on the edge of Harmony Creek. Most recipients were grateful, familiar faces worn by hardship. But one man, smelling sharply of cheap whiskey and desperation, had lingered. When the others dispersed, he'd cornered her, his grip like iron, his words slurred and menacing. She had fought, prayed, screamed inwardly, but her strength was no match for his brute force. He had left her bruised, terrified, and utterly alone in the deepening twilight, scrambling to gather the scattered blankets, her soul feeling as torn as her veil had been. Shame, thick and suffocating, had kept her silent. Reporting it felt impossible. Who would believe her? Anun, Atakit? The questions, the doubt, the potential scandal that could engulf the convent, it was too much to bear. And then, weeks later, the horrifying certainty. She was pregnant. Leaving the order was unthinkable. It was her only home, her sanctuary. Yet, staying meant carrying this impossible secret. She chose silence, wrapping it around herself like a shroud. Morning sickness was disguised as a recurring stomach bug. Her increasing fatigue was attributed to long hours tending the convent's small vegetable garden. When her figure began to change, subtly at first, then more noticeably, she feigned a newfound passion for baking, blaming the extra pounds on sampling her own wares. For the orphans, she'd murmur, avoiding eye contact, when Mother Agnes, the convent's wise and observant superior, commented gently on her healthy appetite. The other sisters, mostly older women settled into their routines, seemed to accept her explanations. Life in the convent was structured, but also allowed for periods of solitude that Maria clung to. She volunteered for tasks that kept her isolated, cataloging books in the dusty library, mending linens in the quiet sewing room, solitary walks in the walled garden during designated recreation times. Every flutter, every kick from within was both a terrifying reminder and a source of fierce, secret love. This child, conceived in violence, was innocent. She prayed constantly, not just for forgiveness for her silence, but for the health and safety of the tiny life dependent on her. She couldn't confess, couldn't risk expulsion, couldn't bear the thought of this child being taken from her, perhaps placed into the often impersonal foster care system she sometimes heard about from their outreach work. As the months wore on, the physical strain became immense. Backaches plagued her, masked by quiet stoicism. Swollen ankles were hidden beneath her long habit. She moved slower, her breath sometimes catching. Sister Margaret, a kind-eyed nun who worked alongside her in the infirmary, occasionally cast worried glances her way. "Are you quite well, Maria? You seem pale." Maria would force a smile, murmur about needing more sleep, and quickly change the subject. Her fear grew with her belly. What would happen when the time came? Could she somehow deliver in secret? The thought was ludicrous, dangerous, yet desperation fueled such fantasies. She read furtively from old medical texts in the library, learning about childbirth, her heart pounding with a mixture of awe and terror. Late March arrived, bringing with it volatile spring weather. Rain lashed against the stained glass windows of the chapel, and wind howled around the old stone building. It was a Tuesday night, the air thick with the scent of rain and damp earth. During evening prayers, a sharp, unfamiliar pain gripped Maria low in her belly. She gasped barely audibly, clutching the wooden pew in front of her. It subsided, then returned stronger. This wasn't the dull ache she'd grown accustomed to. This was different, fiercer, more demanding. Panic seized her. Not now. Not here. She tried to focus on the Latin chants, the familiar cadence of the prayers, but the waves of pain were becoming relentless, stealing her breath. She felt sweat bead on her forehead beneath her wimple. She needed to get back to her cell, to privacy, but her legs felt weak, unsteady. As the final prayers concluded and the other nuns began to rise, Maria tried to stand but collapsed back onto the pew, a low groan escaping her lips despite her best efforts. Mother Agnes, her face etched with concern, turned immediately. "Sister Maria, are you ill?" Maria could only shake her head, tears finally breaching the dam of her composure. Another contraction seized her, more intense than the last. She doubled over, clutching her abdomen, the carefully constructed wall of her secret crumbling around her. She slid from the pew onto the cold stone floor of the chapel aisle, the echo of her involuntary cry swallowed by the vast, vaulted space. "Lord," she whispered, the prayer ragged, desperate, "forgive me." The weight of her silence had finally become too much to bear. The sound of Maria's cry, muffled but distinct in the hushed reverence of the chapel, cut through the gentle shuffling of the departing nuns. Heads turned. Sister Margaret, who had been nearest the door, hurried back, her kindly face creased with alarm. Mother Agnes was already kneeling beside Maria, her experienced eyes taking in the younger nun's pallor, the sweat on her brow, the way she clutched her stomach. "Maria, child, what is it? Where's the pain?" Mother Agnes asked, her voice low but firm, trying to project calm amidst the rising confusion. Maria couldn't speak, only gasp as another powerful contraction gripped her. Her hands instinctively went lower, pressing against the undeniable pressure building within her. The truth, hidden for so long, was forcing its way into the open with brutal insistence. Sister Margaret knelt on Maria's other side, her nursing instincts kicking in. She gently felt Maria's forehead. "She's clammy, Mother," and her breathing. It was then, as Maria arched her back with a choked cry, that the unmistakable reality began to dawn on the two older nuns. Mother Agnes's eyes widened almost imperceptibly, a flicker of disbelief warring with dawning comprehension. Sister Margaret let out a soft, shocked gasp, her hand flying to her mouth. The other nuns, hovering uncertainly nearby, began whispering, their expressions ranging from confusion to dawning horror. "Sisters," Mother Agnes commanded, her voice regaining its authority despite the tremor beneath it. "Return to your cells. Sister Margaret, stay with me." Sister Beatrice, she addressed a stern-faced older nun known for her adherence to rules. "Fetch the medical kit from the infirmary. And boil water. Lots of it." Sister Beatrice hesitated, her lips thin with disapproval, but the superior's command was absolute. She turned stiffly and hurried away. The other nuns dispersed slowly, casting bewildered glances back at the scene unfolding on the chapel floor. The storm outside seemed to mirror the tempest within the ancient walls. Rain hammered against the windows, and thunder rumbled ominously. In the dim light filtering through the stained glass, the scene felt surreal, almost medieval. Mother Agnes, her face a mask of controlled composure, gently helped Maria loosen the restrictive layers of her habit. Sister Margaret, overcoming her initial shock, spoke soothingly, trying to guide Maria's breathing as she remembered from assisting with births during her mission work years ago. "Breathe, Maria." Slow, deep breaths, she urged, her voice trembling slightly. Maria was lost in a vortex of pain, fear, and shame. The carefully guarded secret was now horrifyingly public. The faces of her sisters, the stern set of Mother Agnes's jaw, the cold stone beneath her, it was a nightmare made real. Yet, overriding everything was the primal, unstoppable force of childbirth. Events unfolded with a speed that left little time for deliberation. There was no doctor, no hospital nearby that could be reached quickly on such a night, especially without revealing the situation prematurely. Guided by Sister Margaret's fragmented memories of midwifery and Mother Agnes's steady presence, they managed. They cleared a space, used altar linens brought by a trembling Sister Beatrice for warmth and cleanliness, and prayed. Maria cried out, prayed, wept, apologized, her words jumbled between contractions. And then, amidst the howling wind and driving rain, came a different cry, thin, reedy, but piercingly alive. In the dim, sacred space of the St. Jude Chapel, Sister Maria had given birth to a baby boy. Silence descended, thick and heavy, broken only by the infant's wails and Maria's exhausted sobs. Sister Margaret carefully cleaned the child, her movements gentle but efficient, wrapping him in a clean linen cloth. Mother Agnes knelt, her stern facade finally cracking, revealing a complex mixture of shock, pity, and something akin to awe. She looked from the crying infant to the weeping young nun on the floor. "Maria," she said, her voice softer now, imbued with a deep sadness. "You must tell me, how did this happen?" Through tears of pain, exhaustion, and overwhelming relief that her child was alive, Maria confessed. The words tumbled out: the assault in the alley, the shame, the fear of disgrace, the desperate decision to hide the pregnancy, the prayers for the innocent life within her. She spoke of her terror of being cast out, of her baby being taken away, of failing her vows and her God. Mother Agnes listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. Sister Margaret wiped tears from her own eyes as she held the swaddled baby, rocking him gently. Sister Beatrice stood rigidly by the doorway, her face a thundercloud of judgment. The news, whispered through the convent grapevine faster than any prayer, had already created ripples of shock and division. When Maria finished, her voice barely a whisper, Mother Agnes finally spoke. "This changes everything, Maria," she said gravely. "There are rules, procedures. The bishop must be informed." She paused, looking at the tiny, vulnerable infant now quieting in Sister Margaret's arms. A flicker of compassion softened her features. "But first, you and the child need care. Proper medical attention." She turned to Sister Margaret. "We must call Dr. Evans in town. Discreetly, if possible. Tell him it's an emergency at the convent." For Sister Maria. As Sister Margaret hurried off to the small office phone, Mother Agnes looked back at Maria, still lying weak and vulnerable on the floor. The stern superior, the woman who upheld the order's rules with unwavering diligence, reached out and gently brushed a stray strand of damp hair from Maria's forehead. "Rest now, child," she murmured. "Rest. We will face what comes next together. But even as she offered comfort, Mother Agnes knew the path ahead would be fraught with difficulty, judgment, and decisions that could irrevocably alter the future of Sister Maria, her child, and the quiet life of St. Jude's Convent. The cry in the chapel had shattered the silence, and the echoes were just beginning. Dr. Evans, Harmony Creek's aging but reliable physician, arrived within the hour, his car struggling up the muddy drive against the receding storm. Accustomed to the convent's occasional calls for the elderly sisters, he was unprepared for the scene that greeted him. Mother Agnes met him at the door, her explanation brief and guarded, leading him not to the infirmary, but towards Maria's modest cell, where she and the baby had been carefully moved. Sister Margaret assisted him, her nursing skills proving invaluable as he examined both mother and child. The baby, though small, was thankfully healthy. Maria was weak, exhausted, but physically stable. Dr. Evans, a man of discretion honed by years in a small town, asked few questions, focusing on the medical needs. He provided instructions for care, promised to return the next day, and left some essential supplies. His parting glance towards Mother Agnes held a mixture of professional concern and unspoken understanding. The convent's carefully maintained peace had been profoundly disturbed. Word had indeed spread like wildfire through the small community. While Mother Agnes attempted to maintain order and privacy for Maria, hushed conversations filled the refectory and corridors. Reactions varied wildly. Some older nuns expressed deep sympathy, remembering their own youthful vulnerabilities or times of crisis. Others, led by the austere Sister Beatrice, were scandalized. A nun-bearing child? It was a disgrace, a violation of sacred vows that demanded swift and decisive action, namely, Maria's immediate dismissal from the order. The convent felt charged, the usual contemplative silence replaced by an uneasy tension. Mother Agnes felt caught between the rigid rules of the order and her genuine, almost maternal affection for Maria, whom she had mentored since the young woman arrived as a postulant, full of earnest faith. She knew she had to report the situation to the bishop, a necessary step that filled her with dread. The outcome was uncertain, but expulsion seemed a very real possibility, leaving Maria and her newborn utterly destitute. She prayed for guidance, for wisdom, for a path that balanced justice with mercy. 2 days later, under still gray skies, an unfamiliar vehicle pulled up the convent drive. It wasn't Dr. Evans's practical sedan, nor the bishop's modest car she half expected. It was a sleek, expensive-looking black sedan, the kind rarely seen in Harmony Creek, let alone at the gates of St. Jude's. A man in a tailored dark suit emerged, his bearing confident, his face etched with a certain weariness, but also determination. He introduced himself to Sister Beatrice, who answered the door with suspicion as Gabriel Voss. The name stirred a vague memory from Mother Agnes, who overheard from her office nearby. Voss. Yes, a benefactor, though not a regular one. His late mother, a devout woman who lived in a neighboring county, had sometimes spoken of the peace she found visiting St. Jude Chapel for quiet prayer. She had passed away several months ago, and the convent had offered masses for her soul. Gabriel Voss, it turned out, was her son, a highly successful, semi-reclusive figure in the world of biomedical technology, headquartered several states away. I apologize for arriving unannounced, Sister, Gabriel said, his voice quiet but resonant. I was nearby visiting my mother's grave. I wanted to express my gratitude in person for the kindness you showed her, and make a contribution in her memory. Mother Agnes came forward, extending a hand. Mr. Voss, thank you for coming. Your mother spoke fondly of her visits here. Please come in. She led him towards her small, sparsely furnished office, intending to accept his donation graciously and send him on his way. The convent's current turmoil was not something she wished to share with an outsider, however well-intentioned. But as they walked down the corridor, they passed the infirmary wing. The door to the room where Maria was resting was slightly ajar, and the faint sound of a baby fussing could be heard. Gabriel Voss stopped, his head tilting slightly. He looked at Mother Agnes, a question in his eyes. There was no hiding it now. Taking a deep breath, feeling suddenly weary, Mother Agnes decided that perhaps transparency, or at least partial transparency, was necessary. "Mr. Voss," she began, her voice low, "the convent is navigating a difficult situation at present. One of our sisters, Sister Maria, unexpectedly gave birth 2 nights ago." Gabriel's eyebrows rose, but his expression showed more surprise than judgment. Unexpectedly, Mother Agnes hesitated, then plunged ahead, omitting the traumatic details of the conception, but explaining Maria's hidden pregnancy and the birth in the chapel. She spoke of Maria's youth, her fear, and the convent's difficult position regarding her future and the child's. She didn't intend to share so much, but his quiet attentiveness seemed to draw the story out of her. As she spoke, Gabriel Voss's face underwent a subtle transformation. The polite detachment faded, replaced by a deep, unexpected empathy. When she finished, there was a long silence, broken only by the distant sound of the baby's cry. May I see her? The sister and her child?" he asked, his voice surprisingly gentle. Mother Agnes hesitated, but something in his demeanor, a flicker of shared sorrow perhaps, made her agree. She led him to Maria's temporary room. Sister Margaret was just settling the baby, now named Noah, into a makeshift bassinet. Maria, pale but composed, sat propped up in bed, her simple nun's habit replaced by a plain cotton gown. Gabriel stood in the doorway, observing the scene. He saw the exhaustion and fear in Maria's eyes, but also the fierce, protective love as she gazed at her son. He saw the tiny infant swaddled and vulnerable, and something within him, a grief he carried tightly locked away, resonated deeply. Years ago, he and his late wife had lost their only child, a teenage daughter, in a tragic car accident. The pain had never fully subsided, leaving a void that immense wealth and success could never fill. Seeing this young woman, facing ostracization and an uncertain future, clinging to her newborn son with such desperate tenderness, touched that dormant ache. He stepped quietly into the room. "Sister Maria," he said softly, nodding respectfully. "Mother Agnes told me. A little. You have a beautiful son." Maria looked up, startled by the presence of this stranger, a wealthy, powerful man so out of place in her cloistered world. She clutched the blanket tighter, uncertainty clouding her face. Gabriel turned to Mother Agnes. "What will happen to them?" Mother Agnes sighed. "We are waiting for guidance from the bishop, Mr. Voss. The rules of the order are clear. It's unlikely she can remain here." And the child. Her voice trailed off, the options adoption, foster care feeling bleak. Gabriel looked back at Maria, then at Noah. He thought of his own lost daughter, of his vast, empty house, of the foundation he ran in his daughter's name, dedicated to helping vulnerable children. A sudden, unexpected resolve formed within him. It wasn't logical, perhaps not even entirely rational, but it felt right. "Mother Agnes," he said, his voice firm now, "I understand you have procedures, but this woman and her child need immediate support. Shelter, safety, a future." He paused, meeting Maria's wide, uncertain gaze. "I came here today to make a donation in my mother's memory. Allow me to redirect that." and more. I could provide housing for Sister Maria and her son off convent grounds. I can ensure they have medical care, legal counsel if needed, everything they require while things are being sorted out. Mother Agnes stared at him, astonished. Sister Margaret gasped softly. Maria looked utterly bewildered. Mr. Voss, that is extraordinarily generous, Mother Agnes stammered. But there are no buts, Gabriel stated calmly. My foundation has resources for situations like this. Consider it an extension of my mother's connection to St. Jude's. He looked directly at Maria. Sister, I don't know what your wishes are, but I am offering help. A safe place for you and Noah, with no strings attached, for as long as you need it. It wasn't the instant adoption of the original story, but something far more practical and grounded in offer of immediate, substantial help from an unexpected source. It was a lifeline, thrown into the turbulent waters of Maria's crisis. For Mother Agnes, it was a potential solution, a way to ensure Maria and Noah weren't cast adrift, even if difficult decisions about Maria's standing within the order still loomed. For Maria, stunned and overwhelmed, it was a glimmer of hope in the terrifying darkness, offered by a stranger whose eyes held an unexpected depth of kindness and sorrow. The billionaire's arrival hadn't magically solved everything, but it had decisively altered the path forward. The days following Gabriel Voss's offer were a whirlwind of hushed discussions, difficult decisions, and logistical arrangements. Mother Agnes communicated with the bishop's office, explaining the situation and Mr. Voss's intervention. While the official stance remained that Maria's position within the order was untenable given her violation of vows, however complex the circumstances, there was a palpable sense of relief that she and the child would not be left destitute. The bishop agreed to initiate the formal process for Maria's dispensation from her vows, a lengthy procedure that would allow her to leave the order officially and return to lay life, rather than face a harsh expulsion. Gabriel Voss, true to his word, acted swiftly and discreetly. He arranged for Maria and Noah to move into a comfortable, furnished guest house on his sprawling estate, located about an hour's drive from Harmony Creek. It offered privacy, security, and access to excellent medical care in the nearby city. He hired a gentle, experienced nurse, Mrs. Davies, to assist Maria during the initial weeks, ensuring both mother and baby received proper attention while Maria regained her strength. Leaving St. Jude's was bittersweet. It had been Maria's home, her sanctuary, the only life she had known for nearly a decade. Saying goodbye to Mother Agnes and Sister Margaret, women who had shown her unexpected compassion amidst the crisis, was emotional. Even Sister Beatrice offered a stiff, almost imperceptible nod that might have contained a sliver of grudging respect for Maria's quiet dignity. As the car Gabriel had sent pulled away from the stone walls, Maria clutched Noah close, whispering a prayer for the sister she left behind and for the uncertain future ahead. Life at the Voss estate was a stark contrast to the austerity and routine of the convent. The guest house was luxurious by any standard, with soft furnishings, a modern kitchen, and views of manicured gardens. Initially, Maria felt overwhelmed and out of place. The silence was different here, not the contemplative quiet of the convent, but the empty silence of solitude. Mrs. Davies was kind and professional, but Maria missed the communal life, the shared prayers, the sense of belonging, even amidst her recent turmoil. Gabriel Voss was respectful of her need for space. He visited occasionally, checking on her and Noah's well-being, bringing small gifts for the baby or inquiring gently about her needs. He never pried into the details of the assault, sensing her reluctance to revisit that trauma. Instead, He spoke sometimes of his late daughter, sharing anecdotes that revealed his own lingering grief, creating an unexpected bridge of shared sorrow between them. He saw the innate tenderness in Maria's care for Noah, the quiet strength beneath her reserved demeanor. As weeks turned into months, Maria slowly began to adapt. The rhythm of her days became dictated by Noah's needs: feedings, naps, diaper changes, the simple, consuming tasks of new motherhood. She found a quiet joy in his gurgles and smiles, a fierce, protective love that anchored her in this unfamiliar world. She gradually shed the perpetual fear and anxiety that had marked her pregnancy, replaced now by the everyday worries and wonders of caring for an infant. She began exploring the estate grounds, pushing Noah in a stroller along winding paths, finding solace in the beauty of the gardens. She discovered Gabriel's extensive library and lost herself in books, something she hadn't had much time for in the convent. She started cooking simple meals for herself, rediscovering a practical skill and finding comfort in the familiar rhythm of preparing food. Gabriel, observing her quiet competence and innate compassion, began to see beyond the former nun. He saw a capable, intelligent young woman rebuilding her life under difficult circumstances. One afternoon, finding her reading a report about local community outreach programs, he struck up a conversation about his family foundation. He explained its focus on supporting vulnerable women and children, a mission established in his daughter's memory. "We fund various initiatives," he explained: shelters, educational grants, healthcare access. But managing the smaller community grants, ensuring the funds are used effectively, requires careful oversight. He hesitated, then added, "Your background, sister, forgive me, Marie, your experience with outreach work at the convent. You have a practical understanding of these needs." He wasn't offering charity. He was tentatively suggesting a purpose. He proposed that, when she felt ready, she might consider assisting his foundation manager part-time, reviewing grant applications, perhaps liaising with some local charities. It would be remote work she could do from the guest house, flexible around Noah's schedule. Maria was surprised, then intrigued. The thought of using her skills, of contributing, of having a purpose beyond caring for Noah, though that was her primary focus, was appealing. It offered a way to connect with the world again, to channel her compassion into meaningful action. After careful consideration, she agreed. Working, even part-time, gave Maria a renewed sense of confidence. She proved meticulous, insightful, and deeply empathetic in her assessment of the grant proposals. Gabriel found her input invaluable. Their interactions became more frequent, evolving from benefactor and recipient to something more akin to colleagues, albeit in an unusual context. He began joining her for occasional simple dinners at the guest house, enjoying the quiet normalcy, watching Noah learn to crawl, then toddle, his presence filling the large estate with a life it hadn't known in years. The legal process for Maria's dispensation moved slowly but steadily. Gabriel's lawyers provided quiet assistance, ensuring everything was handled correctly. Simultaneously, Gabriel initiated proceedings to become Noah's legal guardian, a necessary step to provide long-term stability and security, undertaken with Maria's full, grateful consent. The idea of formal adoption wasn't yet on the table. The immediate focus was ensuring Noah's legal status and well-being. Maria was no longer Sister Maria, the nun with a secret. She was Maria, a single mother, finding her footing in a world she never expected to inhabit, supported by an unlikely guardian angel. She was navigating grief, trauma, and the challenges of new motherhood, but also discovering reservoirs of strength she never knew she possessed. The path wasn't easy, filled with moments of doubt and loneliness. But for the first time since that terrible night in the alley, she felt a tentative sense of hope, a fragile possibility of building a new kind of life for herself and her son. 5 years passed. The guest house on Gabriel Voss's estate was no longer just a temporary refuge. It was home. Noah, a bright and energetic 5-year-old, thrived under the dual care of his devoted mother and the man he affectionately called Grandpa Gabe. He knew Maria was his mommy, and Gabe was. Gabe, the provider of piggyback rides, bedtime stories, and endless patience for questions about dinosaurs and spaceships. The complex circumstances of his birth were shielded from him, replaced by an environment of consistent love and security. Maria had blossomed. The initial timidity and uncertainty had gradually given way to quiet confidence and grace. Her part-time work with the Voss Foundation had evolved into a significant role. Recognizing her passion and innate ability to connect with people, Gabriel had eventually appointed her as the director of community outreach programs. She traveled occasionally, visiting shelters, community centers, and educational programs funded by the foundation, her gentle demeanor and firsthand understanding of vulnerability making her incredibly effective. She became a champion for women overcoming adversity, her own story, though never fully shared publicly, fueling her dedication. The legalities had been settled years prior. Maria had received her formal dispensation from her vows, a quiet closure to that chapter of her life. Gabriel, after demonstrating unwavering commitment and providing a stable, loving environment, had successfully navigated the complex process of legally adopting Noah, becoming his father in the eyes of the law, just as he had become a father figure in his heart. Maria remained Noah's mother, and together, they form an unconventional but deeply bonded family unit. Their life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Maria managed her work, cared for Noah, and oversaw the running of the guest house, which now felt entirely like her own space. Gabriel, while still immersed in his demanding business, structured his time to be present for Noah's milestone school plays, t-ball games, birthday parties. He found a joy in Noah's uncomplicated affection and boundless energy that eased the lingering ache from his daughter's loss. He wasn't replacing his daughter, but Noah and Maria had undeniably filled the cavernous emptiness in his life and home. They maintained a respectful, affectionate relationship. There was no romance in the traditional sense, but a deep, abiding friendship built on mutual respect, shared responsibility for Noah, and unspoken understanding of past sorrows. Gabriel provided stability and resources. Maria and Noah provided warmth, purpose, and the sounds of laughter that now echoed through the once silent estate. The connection to St. Jude's hadn't been entirely severed. Mother Agnes, now friar but still leading the convent, exchanged Christmas and Easter cards with Maria. Sister Margaret occasionally sent hand-knitted sweaters for Noah. Maria had made her peace with that part of her past, grateful for the shelter it once provided and for the compassion shown during her darkest hour. She bore no bitterness, only a quiet understanding of the difficult position they had all been in. One sunny Sunday morning, Noah was scheduled to sing a solo in the children's choir at the local community church they had started attending. It wasn't a Catholic church, but a welcoming, non-denominational congregation where Maria had found a comfortable spiritual home, focusing on themes of grace, forgiveness, and community service that resonated with her. She sat in the pew, Gabriel beside her, watching Noah stand nervously with the other children on the chancel steps. When it was his turn, he took a deep breath and sang, his small voice clear and sweet, filling the sanctuary. It was a simple song about love and light, sung with childish innocence. Tears welled in Maria's eyes, tears not of sorrow, but of overwhelming gratitude. After the service, walking out into the bright sunshine, Noah ran ahead to chase a butterfly on the church lawn. Maria turned to Gabriel, her voice thick with emotion. 5 years ago, she began struggling to find the words after Noah was born. I thought my life was over. I thought I had lost everything: my faith, my home, my future. I felt so alone, so ashamed. She looked up at him, her eyes shining. And then you came. You and Noah. You didn't just give me shelter, Gabe. You gave me a family. You gave me back my hope. Gabriel looked down at her, his usual reserve softening into a warm smile. He placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. No, Maria, he said gently. It wasn't just me helping you. You and Noah, you saved me. You brought life back into my empty world. You reminded me what truly matters. He glanced towards Noah, now laughing as the butterfly fluttered just out of his reach. You didn't lose everything that night in the chapel. Maybe you found the beginning of something new, something unexpected, something beautiful. Maria leaned her head against his shoulder for a moment, a silent acknowledgement of their shared journey. From the depths of a painful secret hidden within convent walls, through fear and uncertainty, she had emerged into the light. It wasn't the life she had envisioned when she took her vows, but it was a life filled with love, purpose, and the unexpected grace of a family found in the most unlikely of circumstances, built on courage, compassion, and the open heart of a man who had also learned to hope again. The echoes of the cry in the chapel had faded, replaced by the sweet, clear song of a child and the quiet harmony of a family bound not by convention, but by love.